Associate Health Minister David Seymour announced the government will boost Pharmac's budget by more than $1.7 billion over the next 4 years, increasing the National Drug Purchasing Entity's overall budget to almost $6.3 billion in what Seymour says will be the agency's largest budget. The announcement was made at the Medicines Access Summit that was held in Parliament and co-hosted by Patient Voice Aotearoa and Medicines New Zealand. Now, Pharmac's boss, Sarah Fitt, confirmed the money will simply keep the lights on and that more funding will be needed in May's budget if it wanted to go further. She says Pharmac's focus at the moment is on the funding for the medicines budget, so this is the first step, and Budget 24 will determine whether there's more funding for new medicines. Journalist and patient advocate Rachel Smalley was also at the summit, and she joins me now. Rachel, good to talk to you.
Hi, Leah. I'm still here, actually. It's still going on in the Grand Hall here at Parliament. I'm tucked round by the Speaker's waiting room having a chat to you. But yeah, still underway here.
A long day. Rachel, before we talk about this budget announcement, can we get a bit of context about your involvement with your patient advocacy and also Pharmac? Because over the years you've uncovered some pretty shocking stats about it, haven't you?
Yeah, I've put together a sort of a passion project, I guess. I founded something that's called The Medicine Gap, which really was a storytelling platform to tell the stories of New Zealanders and how they couldn't get access to medicines and what the human impact of that was on them. And that began back in, I think, 2020, and it really rolled on right up into the election. And just ultimately it was trying to bring about change and drive some reform at Pharmac. But it's been a pretty bumpy ride across the way, I have to say, Leah, and, culminated, I think, before the election in some pretty robust conversations and some privacy acts that revealed a whole bunch of information about Pharmac and their relationship really towards, their detractors.
I mean, Rachel, you have said that Pharmac is unchecked, it's unaudited. They're basically a law unto themselves. There were more than 70 drugs languishing on the waiting list. Is that still the number?
Yeah, I think there's on there now for a variety of applications. So, you might have 130-something conditions that we need to be treating, and some of those drugs obviously treat different conditions, like Keytruda is a cancer drug that treats about 9 or 10 different forms of cancer. But yes, that waiting list is growing. It's getting bigger.
Is Pharmac's kind of ethos that they want to treat a lot of people for as cheap as possible, then spending money on, say, what they consider a disease or that only a few hundred may get?
Yeah, 100%. So basically their objectives, which were set in the 1990s, which I think the new chair, Paula Bennett, should be looking to overhaul, essentially it's a really lacklustre, apathetic objective along the lines of, with the budget we're trying to treat as many New Zealanders as is reasonably achievable. And so they try and treat, that's why we have things like HRT being funded, because that's, quite a lot of women who need that. Yeah. Just after 25 years, they're funding anaphylactic pens. They've just funded Keytruda for lung cancer. That's our biggest cancer killer. So they try and treat as many New Zealanders as they can for as little money as possible, basically.
And of course you did mention, Rachel, there was a bit of a culmination of problems last year. There was the scandal really in October, with quite a few impolite comments circulating between Fitt, Sarah Fitt, the boss, yes, board members and you. Now, she has apologised, but I see, apparently, has she apologised to you, Rachel?
She sent me, I think it was Steve Mahari was the directive that came through from the board. This was after the election, that essentially I issued a Privacy Act. You can issue a Privacy Act request for anything about your name, and I couldn't work out. The origins of that were for the best part of, 4 years. I felt that Pharmac had sort of resisted every interview request that I'd put to them. So I wanted to dig a little deeper, what's going on there. And then we normally use the Official Information Act, right? That's when you can source information about, a communication strategy or a policy or what have you. But the Privacy Act, you can source information about your name. And most ministers and most government entities would be pretty sharp on that. They wouldn't be putting that because they know it's discoverable, as they say. They wouldn't be putting that in emails. But of course, Pharmac's it's not a transparent organisation. It doesn't really answer to anyone. And so I issued a Privacy Act request, thinking that it might reveal a little bit about why they were blocking me. And that's what uncovered all of 275 pages of commentary in and around, particularly internally in Pharmac and to their board as well. But over and above what they said about me, it was also they were critical of editorials that I'd written about cancer patients who were self-funding medicines and who would be, dead if they weren't self-funding those medicines. And so it really threw a light on the culture at Pharmac and how it's very defensive and doesn't seem to be focused on either being held to account or doing the best it can for New Zealanders to try and achieve the best health outcomes it can. So it was it really lifted the lid, I guess, on a culture of an organisation that has, there are commercially sensitive bits of information about Pharmac that they've always been able to keep quiet, and rightly so. All of their negotiations about drugs and what have you is all under the radar. But that's kind of crept through the organisation, and they don't feel they're accountable to a lot. It feels, anyway, certainly to me in the media. And we saw the Pharmac review come out that was commissioned under Jacinda Ardern in the end, under pressure in an election debate. She agreed to it. And to this day, neither Steve Mahari or Sarah Fitt have agreed to an interview about what was a very damning review of their leadership and their governance at Pharmac.
Well, it's interesting because David Seymour has today, he said he has full confidence in Sarah Fitt and has even called her very diligent and professional. I mean,
well, yes, it's an interesting situation, right, because as a minister, and for very good reason, government can't lean in and dislodge a CEO or influence that role. The person who can is the board. So David Seymour, if he chose, could sack the board. He could install a whole new board. And I think we will see some new board members coming into Pharmac as well.
Right.
But what he can't do is move a CEO on. That's for very good reason, is protected. So I would think that he would be probably frustrated by the situation we found ourselves in, but it would be up to Paula Bennett and the board. They're the only people who can move on that CEO.
Yeah, a very good point. So let's talk about this announcement, this 1.77 billion over the next 4 years?
For 4 years, yeah. Every year for 4 years.
I mean, that's got to be, it's good news, but probably still not enough.
Yes, it is good news, but here's the problem. What that money essentially has to do, you may have heard, Leah, that they spoke about a fiscal cliff for Pharmac. So under the last government, they funded some medicines like Trikafta for cystic fibrosis, and as I mentioned, Keytruda for lung cancer and what have you. But what happens when, as a government, you fund a medicine for several years, and you do that because you're never going to decommission a medicine. You're not going to give kids with cystic fibrosis a medicine, and then the next year go, we don't have enough money. So you